You are listening to Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour, a podcast released on the first 3 Wednesdays of the month. Family crisis, relationship crisis, addiction crisis, no two crisis situations are the same. They vary by family, individual, and relationship. They can encompass complex family dynamics, emotional distress, anger issues, and entitlements, and often involve substance abuse. This podcast addresses these issues and others surrounding the addiction epidemic currently plaguing this country and the world. There is hope and help.
Are you stuck, scared, or unsure of what to do next? If a situation with a loved one, spouse, or even a child has started to spiral, possibly becoming dangerous or threatening, it's time to seek help. My name is Scott H. Silverman. I help families navigate crisis situations. I'm the person you turn to in order to get you and your loved ones unstuck.
Welcome back to the show. This is Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour. I'm Michael Glenn Moore, and I am Scott's co-host. Scott, I'm in a different room today because I have experienced a hurricane. Back a couple of weeks ago, Hurricane Laura came through, and actually I experienced it in Northwest Louisiana. I've never experienced a hurricane up here before. Normally we just have rain and some thunderstorms and so forth, but this time we had the wind, and a tree blew into my house, and a tree blew in the backyard. We were without power for 5 weeks, but everything's fine. My mother and I are doing well, and fortunately we're doing much better than the people in Pacific Northwest and California. It's just horrible what's going on with the fires and everything. But Scott, I'm here, so let's do the show. Go ahead.
Awesome. Well, Michael, I'm glad things worked out for you and your family. I know I can't imagine, I've never been through something like that, but, living in California, I do remember growing up, there was a time when everybody thought California was actually physically going to separate from the rest of the country. So I remember we were going to some sporting goods store to get a life raft and get life preservers, and we really thought we were going to be floating to Hawaii. I mean, and now it's between earthquakes and the fires and the COVID virus. It's a very strange time for all of us. But I'm glad to see you back, and missed you, and everybody was concerned about you because we do this every week, and without Michael, it cannot be done. He's the man with the brains and the outfit, and gets everything together for us. So, Scott H. Silverman here. Welcome to Happy Hour. We have a very special guest today, but before we get to our special guest, just so you know, don't forget to email, text, or call Scott H. Silverman. I want to hear from you. YourCrisisCoach.com, 619-993-2738. Call or text and go on and give us a review. We're trying to build some momentum right now so we can get to more listeners in need. I just came off of a 2-hour meeting doing Recovery Happens here in our community in San Diego, and Recovery Happens throughout the country right now. And September is National Recovery Month and also Suicide Awareness Month. So we are busy in our industry trying to build awareness, build access, and reduce stigma. Speaking of stigma, I want to introduce our guest today. India Kern has a really unique, I call it unique, and when she told me there's only 200 some odd individuals that are certified in the country to do what she does, which is truly unique as a coach, but coaching in a specific arena that I think in California, what's it, 52% or so of Californians don't stay together as couples. And she's created this real interesting niche and area of specialty. I'm going to let her tell you all about it. I won't even tell you what it is. I'm going to let her tell you all about it. So with that, I want to turn it over to India. And India, welcome to our show, and share with everybody who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Scott, for having me. So I am a certified divorce coach, and many people don't know what that is. Basically, I say, look at me like a guide. I guide you through the transition of divorce from married to happily divorced. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but it is possible because I did it myself. And I even wrote a book about it called Surviving The Unwanted Divorce. And so I specialize in working with people who are stuck in their divorce story, stuck in their divorce pain. I help them gain confidence, build a sense of security, and be happy again. And what keeps us stuck? Well, the belief that life did not turn out as we planned, right? And rarely does it turn out as we planned, but it's really shifting mindset, shifting perspective, because what we focus on expands. So I help people change perspective. And as a result, change their story, change their reality.
So be a little more specific, because, people have heard of life coaches and career coaching, and, I'm a crisis coach and I'm a family navigator, but tell us a little bit more about what a divorce coach actually is, and the certification you had to go through, because how many people did you share with me once are actually in the country that have actually completed a certified divorce coach training?
Right. At that time, and I think there's more because it's actually being a lot more exposed to the public. But at that time, that was about a year ago, I asked the CDC, Certified Divorce Coaching Institute, what the number was in the US of certified divorce coaches. And it was only at that time about 200. Now, I would say it's gone up because I've seen a surge in divorce platforms. There's a lot of different services out there that bring together all the divorce professionals. So it's still very...
India, would you say that you're kind of in a growth industry right now?
Absolutely.
Unfortunately or fortunately, it's
yeah, absolutely. And again, just for the disclaimer, I never promote divorce. In fact, I have people that are on the fence and trying to decide whether they should do it or not. So I'm not promoting divorce in any capacity. I will help you make the right decision for your situation. But let me get to the specifics. So say, divorce can be super overwhelming. For me, I didn't know where to even begin. And if I had that resource of someone, right beside me, walking alongside me, helping me make wise and informed decisions, that would have really helped. I went to a therapist and that was great, but it really covered what was behind me, right? My past. How did you get here? Well, I'll tell you how I got here, but I needed someone from this point forward to help me devise a plan. So together with my client, I basically focus on the emotional recovery of you. So this can be facing divorce, in the middle of divorce, or 5 years later and you're still stuck, right? So it's the emotional recovery. It's also becoming prepared for the emotional and the mental, like getting emotionally and mentally prepared for the business of divorce. Now, what is the business of divorce? That would be the legal, the financial, right? So that stuff, if you're not in it, you don't really know how it works. I mean, it was like a different language when I came along because I'd never been in that space. So that's where I come alongside you and help you get ready for if you're going to litigation or if you're going to mediation. I also, like I said, make a plan. So whatever your path may be, whether you're going to try to make this marriage work or you're headed down divorce, we devise a plan and then I hold you accountable. I help you execute on this plan. So I'm a sounding board, I'm a thinking partner, and the overall goal is to reach clarity, because I think that's what so much of us are in, this reptilian brain state when we're in high stress levels, right? So it's fight, flight, or flee. And so I help come in, and when anxiety is high, the best way to reduce anxiety and fear is to have a plan. So instead of forget everything and run, you're like, okay, wait, let's have a plan. Let's be strategic about this. What are the questions I need to ask my attorney so I don't spend $4.25 an hour telling him what my husband or my wife did to me, right? So removing the emotional, that's where we talk, right? And then so you can go to that meeting, ask the questions that you need answered that pertain only to the business of divorce. So you're keeping things in their own lane, so to speak. So they come to me with all the, oh my gosh, look at what he did. I don't know how to react to this. What should I say? That's where I come in. So that's in a nutshell. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. So tell me, out of a group of, let's say, 10 couples, what percentage are, I'm going to use a gender question here, and I don't want to exclude anybody, but what percent are the female versus the male in a traditional marriage that are coming to you? And obviously with all the different mixed marriages we have today, you probably have those as well. So can you break that down demographically?
Okay, well, most of my clients are women. I do have, like, out of, let's say 10 clients, 1 is a male. So that's usually the case. And I like to compare it to who asks for directions on a road trip. the woman, right? I mean, the man is like, no, I can do this, right? So the woman's more willing to, typically, that's very much a stereotype, but the woman is more typically open to suggestions and how to drive down this path, so to speak.
Okay. So before you started doing what you were doing, where would somebody, when I think of, I'm fortunate, knock on wood, I've been together with my wife for 38 years. And, now that we're both homebound with the COVID, we've learned some interesting stuff. That's why, and Mike will attest this, I'm now living in the shed, a little tiny house next to the garage outside, but that's okay. It's working out, just no running water. So I have to come in for that. But tell me where would somebody go? I mean, traditionally, I'm thinking you go to a therapist or you go to an attorney. Who else was out there?
Well, that's what I found. So I actually decided to do this because that was the missing piece for me when I was going through my divorce. I had not been into my finances. My first husband did that. He handled all that. So then I'm faced with, I have to come up with a financial disclosure, and I don't even know the first thing about our finances. Like, where do I even begin? So I fumbled my way through this process. Thank goodness I had some really honest, the accountant that we both were using, and she was very honest, so she helped me through the process. But before, there really wasn't, the therapist, if they're a therapist / coach, that's a different story. But what I found is, my therapist and I were talking about why I married my first husband. And that's great to understand the red flags I missed. And I have a pretty good idea of why I married him. But that was not helping me go forward and dealing with the business and dealing with the emotions that I was dealing with right now. So I think it was a missing piece to the puzzle, because when you're facing divorce, it's like these puzzle pieces in one big mound, right? And you got to put things back together and put this puzzle back together. And that missing piece was someone to help guide me to what I should be doing. What's the best thing I can do to create the least collateral damage? And divorce can be it can be so devastating to a family, to the kids, to the financial purse strings, all that. So I pretty much did everything wrong. So now you don't have to do it. I've already done it for you, and I can show you how not to do it the way I did it.
Right. So another out of 10 people, how often are you able to steward a reunification? And does that happen in your industry?
Absolutely. Yes. So reconciliation is I love to see that. I mean, that's I always tell any client that's looking at me, I first ask, what do you want? Have you already made a decision on this divorce? And some do, some are on the fence. I said, okay, we don't know where you have two paths at this point. We don't know which one you're going to take yet, and that's okay. But I am never going to sway you one direction or the other. You are going to come to your own conclusion. I'm going to ask you the right questions to find that clarity. But that is something that, yes, it does. I have actually 2 clients right now who are in that very situation. They don't know what it's going to look like, but we're just peeling back the onion to understand, well, what can we do? If it is going to stay together, what are the steps you can take right now to help that marriage? A great question is, what do you intend to create in your marriage? Rather than blame the spouse, like you do this, this, and this, what would you like to create together? Let's talk about that. Let's take that to the marriage counselor, So yes, that's one of my favorite people to work with, someone that doesn't really know.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a personal, uncomfortable question. Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
Okay. You probably have some Kleenex somewhere in that room, right? It's not going to be that bad. You made an interesting statement, and I want to see what comes out of that with this question. You mentioned your ex-husband. You knew why you married him, and there's a 2-part question. So I want, if you don't mind sharing that, and then the second part of it is, what did you do differently with the information you had around that experientially that may have changed what you did next time? Does that make sense?
Yes.
What's that nugget? Because when you said it, you kind of smiled in a way like Michael does when he gets serious. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because your whole facial expression shifted, like, boy, if I had known that before, I might not have this. But, I mean, none of us have crystal balls. And actually, one of my questions is, if you had a magic wand towards the end of the interview, I want to ask you that. So you understand my question?
I do.
Oh, yeah.
So let's go back to my history, because I'm very open with it. So my father was a raging alcoholic. I never knew, I was born into it. I never knew what I was going to wake up to. I mean, all the dishes in the house would be broken on the floor. I mean, it was chaos. So he set the dysfunctional bar pretty high, right? So when I started dating, the guys that were a little bit crazy didn't have anything on my dad, right? So the bar was set so high that a little bit of dysfunction was overlooked, right? Well, so that's what I did. I essentially married someone that I knew had some issues, and I recognized it, but it was nothing compared to what my dad had, right? So that's where I overlooked the red flags. I was raised in Al-Anon. My mom went to Al-Anon a lot. I remember those were back in the days when smoking was allowed, and I used to suffocate every Tuesday and Thursday night with my mother. But so I was raised in it, and I should have known better, but because I was comparing what I saw to my father and what he did, it was not comparable, So I made the same mistakes. I ended up marrying someone that really was not aligned with who I wanted to be. Now that took some time to realize what I wanted to be. So when I went to these therapy appointments, we're talking about my past. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I know why I married him. He basically is very similar to my father, not as bad, but there were some things that I was used to. One therapist put it brilliantly. He said, we're waiting on the bus that takes us back home. And I jumped on that bus, and so it didn't work out. And so now the second part of the question is, how did I change the trajectory, right? So I didn't do the same thing, because you see that all the time, right? Like one person marries the same person, husband number 4 is the same profile. So when I had this devastating divorce, I was so committed to not being like my parents. I watched them go through the divorce in 1991. I was just starting college, and both of them were so bitter. And so you could light them up with one question 30 years after the divorce. I mean, that's how crazy, like my mother, you can still get her mad in like 2 seconds by asking a question. She's lovely, but their work was never done around the anger, resentment. It was bitterness. So when I faced divorce, after being a child of divorce, I said to myself, and I made a promise, I will not become bitter. I will become better. And that's actually my tagline. When it comes to divorce, you have a choice to get bitter or get better. I help you get better. So I didn't know how I was going to do that, right? When in the beginning, I was like, I'm committed to healing. Don't really know what that looks like, but I'm committed. So what I did is I journaled, and I read other people's stories. And then I also read about codependency. I read anything I could get my hands on. It's almost like I got my master's in this, like, healing from divorce. So then I started taking notes. I journaled. These journals became my book called Surviving the Unwanted Divorce. In the book, I have all the tools and strategies that I use to actually heal. So I thought from the end, right? So thinking from the end, I knew I wanted to heal, didn't know the in-between, but I got there by just processing it. So when I wrote the book and, like I said, studied divorce, then I made an intention to marry someone that was aligned with my core beliefs. And so, like I said, I did so much work. I knew what I stood for. I knew that the next man I married I'm a Christian, and I am strong in my faith. I knew that he had to be aligned with my faith or it wouldn't work. And the other things that go along with that. So that's how I chose the man that I'm married to now. And we have a completely different relationship. So good. It's such a great relationship. In fact, I often say, if my apple cart had not been turned over and, smashed to bits and put on fire, because my story is pretty crazy, then I would not have discovered how good life could be. Because I really did create a beautiful life after the devastation of divorce. And so can everyone else.
You made a statement in your sharing there about how you should have known better. How does someone actually know better until they get the experience? Because, I've watched the example of this family. Have this mother of 4 children, 3 of them went through all kinds of rehabs, and the youngest, that's when the mother finally called me. She said, well, I don't understand. The youngest watched all 3 of their siblings, go through the horrendous journey of getting treatment, going into recovery. Why would they do it themselves? Well, it was predisposed. Different with addiction. It's a disease. Right. But how does one, until one learns, makes mistakes, get outside knowledge, work with others, talks about it. So, because part of what I see with shame-based experiences or untreated trauma is people blame themselves. Mm-hmm. And they end up punishing themselves because they should have known better, but they didn't have the tools to evaluate. And sometimes people live in relationships, I don't have to tell you, much longer than they should until they do that pivot like you've just described and found, the peace of mind and that true partner that, can walk the road of, happiness and they move towards that kind of joy. So how would you say to others, if you make a decision that doesn't quite work out, what do you need to do? And then, A, you can fix it, B, you can change it. And what's the third option? Make one up.
Yeah. So that's a good question. I guess I said that because I was immersed in Al-Anon. I mean, I was a kid, but still I knew the language. I knew what to look for. I even had someone ask me before I got married to my first husband, you're not aligned in your faith. And I just kind of was like, yeah, well, he says he'll go to church or whatever. So I like smoothed over some things that deep down I knew weren't aligned, but I was young. I was in my 20s, so there's that too, that, I was naive. So if you're in it, that's where you really have to, I like to say, think from the end. When you think about the next 5 years, where do you want to be in 5 years? You may not know how you're going to get there, but do you want to be where you are now, or do you want it to change? And then you from that point, you either change the situation or you just stay in it. Like you always say, are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? And those are the people that come to me because they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so, it does take a proactive stance because, you have to make the decision to change.
So how do you see the abuse of, because obviously this is what I'm passionate about, how do you see the abuse of drugs and alcohol in the role it plays in divorce?
Well, besides the, wrecking ball of marriages that alcohol and drug abuse do, I see it from a different standpoint. I see this so many times, and I call it the roadblocks to avoid and divorce. But what I see is someone gets divorced, and then instead of dealing with the pain, because nobody wants to deal with grief and pain, right? And cry it out and work on it. They use a numbing agent so they don't have to deal with the real issues. So that could be shopping, it could be busyness, it could be alcohol, it could be drugs. And so that's where we really have to take inventory of what we're doing with ourselves. And a lot of times alcohol, drugs will come into play because they don't, it postpones dealing with the pain, right? It softens it. It puts that fog over it so you don't have to think about the pain. So that's where I see people use roadblocks with alcohol and drugs to avoid the pain they need to deal with from the divorce. So that's very typical in healing from divorce. People use other agents. And another way I see it is, and I always say this, when you're in any kind of high conflict, like say you're married to high conflict personality, which I would put alcoholism, drug addict, all that in one, big balloon. it's like codependency and high conflict alcoholism just fit together like peanut butter and jelly, right? So what happens is when the client comes to me, typically it's the codependent one, and they have given to the point that they have nothing left. So they are bending over backwards, and they're like, I don't understand why I feel this way. And they're still trying to do it, even if they're divorced. They're still trying to accommodate this high conflict personality spouse. And we start redirecting the shift to like, what are you doing for yourself? Let's start filling up your physical health and your emotional well-being and your spiritual walk, because you're out of balance and you don't even know it. You're like below empty. And so you see that so much with my clients, is they're just still, focus is so much on the other person. And the shift is when you turn it on yourself. And those 3 compartments that I talk about, I really do focus on counterbalancing, putting a little in the physical health, a little bit in the emotional well-being. That could be therapy, that could be coaching, that could be reading someone else's story to see how they successfully transitioned from married to divorce. And then the spiritual component, I think, is huge. And that doesn't necessarily mean faith. That could be meditation. It could be just being still. It could be just recognizing that there's something out there larger than myself that wants the best in me. And so we talk about all those components and how we can fill up in each area, which helps bring balance back to their life. So that's where I see a lot of codependency, and what self-care is so essential when you're recovering from a relationship with a high conflict personality.
Got it. That's great. Last question. If you had a magic wand, what would you do with it?
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's a big question. Like, just personally?
Well, we're talking to you. Yeah. How would you, because I think people, when they listen, they're going to want to hear from you. So, and I saved the big one for the very end. Michael says, save the good question for the end. So yeah, you personally get a magic wand, based on our topic today, but still life, relationships, gut health, wellness, balance. If you had a magic wand, what would you do to help others?
I think this is what I would do. I am a big believer in mindset. And in fact, I even teach webinars on mindset strategy. And I have one coming up October 7th, just to let you know. But mindset strategy is so important to me because change begins with our thoughts. And I say that because thoughts become words, words become habits, habits become, or actions, and actions become habits, habits become your reality. So you really have to analyze what you're telling yourself, especially behind the words, I am. Let me give you a perfect example. So a typical client, or maybe not typical, but I'll hear this. My life is over. Okay, is that true? Is your life over, or is your marriage over? Because there's a big difference in your words. So language is so important. Language matters. And whatever you're telling yourself, I'll give you another example. Say you're going to bed, and when you're in high stress, there's a mind loop going on. And sometimes that keeps you up, or it wakes you up in the middle of the night, and you just keep looping, right? Loop, loop, loop. And what's happening is you're marinating on this negativity for 8 hours. So then what does your being do? It tries to make this loop, this chatter, a truth in your life, because what we focus on expands, right? So here's where I would like to take the magic wand. I would love for more people to understand that language matters, and what you're hearing yourself say is the critical piece to your reality, because your reality is based on your strongest beliefs. So we got to change our beliefs in order to change our life. So change the story, change your life is essentially what I'm saying. So I wish more people would embrace that and really analyze their thoughts, because it will change their life.
That's great. I learned a long time ago with this guy named John McKnight. He was a community coalescer around the country, and maybe 40 years ago, he wrote these books. And one of the things he suggested, that when people sit down in different levels of, government, community, nonprofit, faith-based, that in order to really create effective change and to develop emerging leadership and create new leaders, we're going to have to come up with a new common language, because the common language that we're currently this was 40 years ago. And you look at what's going on with the divide today, one says this, one says that, people take political positions to make decisions. It's like, where's the heart in all of this? Anyway, it was great listening to your insight today. So tell everyone how to get a hold of India Kern. How do they do that?
So there's a couple of ways you can. I encourage everyone to check out my website because I have a ton of free resources, PDFs, a podcast, a blog, and that's just my name, India Kern. It's India like the country. Kern is KERN.com, IndiaKern.com. And then if you want to talk to me, and I offer anyone that's interested in coaching, I offer free coaching. So contact me at my email. That's connect@IndiaKern.com. So I'm also on Facebook, on Instagram as the Divorce Recovery Mentor. And let's see what else. I think that's it. So yeah, I'm in many places. So please reach out. I'd be happy to give a free coaching session to you. It's a 30-minute. And I really didn't discuss how I work with my clients, but I do one-on-one coaching. It's an hour long. It's on Zoom. I do in person if you're in town and feel comfortable with it, maybe after COVID. But anyway, so I do that as well. And then I also have a online course that I just launched, and that is a do it yourself, like at your own speed, and it comes to your email. For 5 weeks, you get 5 modules. So that it can be found on my website as well. So you can find all this at IndiaKern.com.
Awesome. All right, Michael, back to you.
Well, India, go ahead, and you mentioned earlier, I think, that you do a webinar. Is that true?
I do. Yes. Thank you. So I have one coming up, and it's going to be speaking about mindset strategy, what I'm passionate about. And that is October 7th at 11:30. And so I will have that on my website, IndiaKern.com. It's actually already up. So if you want to, you have to register in order to go to it, but it's free. So go ahead and sign up for that, because it'll be some great tips and strategies on how to get through any life transition. So it doesn't have to be just divorce. It could be, what you're going through with the pandemic. It could be divorce. It could be bankruptcy, job loss, etc. Any life transition.
Okay, and plug your book again.
And so my book is called Surviving the Unwanted Divorce. It's about my story, and it's on Amazon. So yeah, check it out.
Okay, I had a question that I just want to ask. I don't know if it's real relevant, but do you find that you have seasons when people are divorcing, or like for now with the COVID and everything, is the divorce rate higher, or do you get more clients at a certain point of the year or anything like that?
Well, I'll tell you this, when COVID happened, the pandemic happened, there was an uptick in clients. So I think that's directly correlated to people either seeing their mortality and being like, what am I doing? I need to make a change, and or being stuck with someone that they plan to divorce and they don't know how they're going to do it for, when they're stuck inside with a person. So I've had definitely more clients since COVID, and I think it's definitely correlated to that.
Okay, we had asked you to give us a positive quote to end our show. Do you have one for us today?
I do. I'm a big believer of Wayne Dyer. I'm a big follower. And he says, because this relates to divorce, because a lot of people, when they get divorced, feel lonely, right? So he says, you are not lonely if you love the person you're with. And so that's what coaching's all about, is really loving the person you're with and finding that self-love and investing back in yourself.